So, thank you, Andrew, for coming on the channel and chatting to me. I know we've been talking over a good few months regarding your first release, which I think is now just about to deliver.
Yeah, hopefully it's going to be fulfilled next week. That's
Great.
Sort of first, second, third week of April, people should all be receiving their games.
Brilliant,
hopefully.
brilliant. And obviously we're going to talk about plans for the next one, next ones, as they will be. So for the benefit of the listeners, perhaps just give me a little bit of an overview of your hobby background, how you got to this point, really, where we are today.
So I've been a wargamer, figure wargamer, probably to start with, for 20, 30 years, probably more. Mostly Napoleonics, but done lots of different periods. Member of Guildford War Games Club, where you get quite a lot of exposure to different games, different game rules, and so on. So I've been figure gaming for a long time.
Right.
Sort of board gaming for sort of 10 years or so. Started designing board games through wanting to play multiplayer games on a board. So started with just friends from the club. It got me into the bug, really, just wanting to design. And just, I think, like virtually all war games, a bit like anybody that reads a lot, everyone says there's a book inside everyone. I think it's the same really with games. I think most people have a game inside them.
Interesting.
And so so I came at it really from the hobby side. I was painting figures to start with, and then sort of led on from there.
Okay. So the evolving from figures to board games, what kind of led you to that? What kind of was the turning point for you to go, perhaps, I'm not saying necessarily out of wargaming, but more into board gaming, which it seems like you do a bit more of now?
Yeah, I think some of it is time. I think I still wargame with figures as well, figure gaming. Some bigger figure games can take a long time to play, if depending on the scenario you're setting up, but also lots of preparation with preparing your armies, painting, organising. Whereas a board game is much more compact. It's just open the box, get the game out, play the game, put the box away. You don't need terrain, you don't need lots of figures, not a lot of stuff to transport, so it's easy to go to other people's houses. So I think as I've got older, really, I've just progressed more towards board gaming, and there's so many more board games about now on really interesting subjects. There's so much being published. Much more approachable and playable rules as well in board games now, sort of modern board gaming. I think some of that has come across from mainstream board gaming. A lot of the whole board gaming world has kind of expanded and exploded over the last 20 years. So the older style of game that might be very heavy on rules and very slow and very long to play, and then perhaps not have a very satisfactory outcome. Things have progressed a lot since then. And so it's a really attractive prospect, spend an afternoon with your friends just having a board game, really. So I've just gone, it was more of a drift into it, really, and realising that I liked it.
I'd echo that. I think things I often talk about on the channel, on some of my videos, is how the dynamics have changed, maybe, and people have got less time. Cost, all those factors, and I think board games have seen a real evolution and revolution, really, in the last 10 years in terms of, particularly, these sorts of historical games are coming 10 to the dozen now, releases, and the quality and the mechanics, are just getting better and better all the time, aren't they, from that point of view? And I think there's a real crossover, but and it's interesting, we both come from the same angle on this, between war games and board gaming. And maybe we need to encourage more board gamers to play war games and more war gamers to play board games.
I think it's a very natural progression. I mean, there's so many similarities. I mean, quite often when I've war gamed with lead figures, I've wanted to play campaigns. I've done a lot of campaigns over the years tying battles together to use with your figures,
Yeah.
but do a lot of either via email or by post originally
Yeah.
with friends,
Yeah.
To build a situation where you could then go to the tabletop and fight out the battle that you'd constructed through your campaign.
Sure.
And board games offer that to you. Quite often in a board game, you will be playing out whole campaigns, or whole battles linked through campaigns, and often you can do it, just a few hours rather than weeks and weeks. Yeah. So there's there's a lot of attraction to be able to do the things you're interested in doing. I wouldn't say it replaces figure gaming.
No.
I think they're very parallel. I like both hobbies. But I wouldn't even think that they're separate hobbies. I'd kind of, wargaming is a hobby, and aspects of wargaming is board gaming, aspects is figure gaming. There is quite a crossover in my mind, for what you're wanting to achieve. A lot of figure games can be card driven now. A lot of board games can be card driven. This kind of crossover between mechanics and things is becoming more and more common, and it's good. It's bringing a lot more interest into the hobby.
No, I agree. I think certainly YouTube and social media, there's a lot more focus on that, and again, you're getting around a lot more of the show circuit than I am, but certainly my experience of shows is there probably isn't enough joined up thinking with board games and war games at the moment. They tend to be separate shows. It'd be nice to see those come together a little bit more, which may help strengthen the longevity of those shows as well. We're losing a lot of war game shows because of cost and trade and everything else, but maybe if we encourage more board games into those shows, that might be a useful opportunity for a lot of people.
I think a lot of figure gamers probably do board game as well. I think people that probably only board game, might be difficult for them to access the figure gaming because they feel as though, well, I've got to build up this collection of figures, and it's going to take a long time, and it's going to cost a lot of money. I've got to build the terrain. And so going from board gaming to figure gaming, there is more of a barrier. But going the other way from figure gaming to board gaming is almost a natural progression. It's actually just, you've got loads of knowledge of rules and mechanics and the historical knowledge, and you're just then applying that to a board game. Reading the rules in a board game, it's simple. I mean, because you're so used to reading how many war game figure game rule sets are like over 100 pages. It's really common for it to be 100 pages plus. So when you open a board game and it's only 40 pages, you think, it's not very many rules in here. And yet they can still be quite complicated games. I'm not trying to belittle that at all. What I'm just saying is that so easy to go between the two. In my view, anyway. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed my transition to doing both aspects of the hobby.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting. So obviously we're going to talk a bit about the games themselves and form square games. I suppose the first thing really is, where did the name come from? Obviously we've all heard of form square. We know where that comes from as board gamers and war gamers, but what was the idea behind that?
Okay, so once I decided to look at self-publishing, obviously I was going to have to form a company. I thought, I'm going to need a name. The Napoleonic period is definitely the period for all the wargaming that I've done that I've been the most interested in.
Right.
And I've always loved the Napoleonic dynamic between the line, the square, cavalry, infantry, artillery, that kind of triad, all that kind of thing really appeals to me. That's I think what draws me to the hobby.
Sure.
The trying to represent that and that interaction. So forming square has always been like an interesting thing. And then I was thinking, well, I want to sit around a table with my friends, and what am I doing? I'm forming a square. Often I play. There's four of us. Often play. Sometimes there's more, but so often we're sitting around a square dining room table in a square. We formed a square, and now we're playing a game. So I just thought, this formed square around the game and the actual formation just tied in lovely. So
yeah, no, that's good.
So that's where the that's where the name came from.
Yeah, no, that's good. So I know we had a chat off camera beforehand, but again, for the benefit of the listeners, where did you start with this in terms of your process and your thinking around, right, I want to make a game or a series of games, I want to set up a company, you know, kind of where did you take your inspiration from in terms of what were your next steps going to be in that process?
Okay. So, I mean, there's sort of two questions in there. Where did I start with the game? Where did I start with like forming a company? So they're kind of different things. So I knew I wanted to design games. I was interested in design. And for me personally, I think people approach design differently. For me personally, it's all about finding a mechanic. So I was interested in how a game works, how you form the mechanics, how do you put a game together. So for this series of games, for Limits of Glory, and for the other game I designed, Coalitions, both times the start point was just finding that one single mechanic that kind of interested me and I wanted to explore. So with Limits of Glory, I wanted a simple mechanic that I could do everything with. I wanted one mechanic to be the same mechanic for every aspect of the game, and still every aspect to be different. So I wanted to have combats and sieges and uprisings and movement, and I wanted to do all of them using exactly the same mechanic.
Okay.
But obviously, movement is very different to fighting a siege. But I wanted to using the same method.
Yeah.
And so that kind of challenge of, well, how am I going to design that? That was what drew me to that.
Sure.
Okay. As I say previously, with Coalitions, a game I've designed for Phalanx, same again. I wanted to explore the whole idea of having to negotiate with your enemies to be able to do something, and that was the driving mechanic. And so then the whole game then gets fleshed out around the mechanic.
Right. Okay.
As for how I decided to form a company, so once I'd finished designing or in the process of designing the first game in the series, Bonaparte's Eastern Empire, I decided I did want to self-publish it rather than take it to a publisher. I knew it was only going to have a sort of small circulation, so it would limit the publishers that would be interested in it.
Sure.
It was much more. I was interested in getting the game out there and doing it rather than trying to produce thousands of copies or anything like that. I just it was a design challenge really. So I knew I'd have to publish it myself. So then it was a process of thinking, well, I don't know anything about this. I'm going to have to learn, and I wanted to learn in a way that won't cost me any. If I make a mistake, I don't want to end up in trouble. So I just decided just to go softly, do it very small. Started on a GameFound campaign rather than a Kickstarter campaign. Any reason for that is my personal belief is I felt that going forward, I think GameFound is much more focused purely on board games than Kickstarter is. I may be wrong on that. Other people might disagree, but that's just my view. So I thought I'd go with GameFound and just learn the process and make mistakes as I go, which I have made mistakes as I've gone. And so at the end of the process, we've now got to the end of the Bonaparte in Egypt, the Bonaparte's Eastern Empire process. I've now feel as though I've done every step, and I've done my kind of apprenticeship on how to publish. Yeah. I've got lots of other game designs lined up, and now it's going to be a question of hoping that people out there are going to like these games and going to want to play them. Yeah. And if they do, then hopefully there's many more to come. Now I've got a better idea of what I'm doing. Yeah. But, you can certainly get a lot of information from the internet, from YouTube, from listening to blogs, to listening to other people, from looking at other people's GameFound and Kickstarter campaigns and analysing them, seeing what they're doing well, seeing what's liked. You just got to keep looking at everything and try to pick up what you can.
You found the community as a whole, the hobby community, has been quite open and sharing with information and sort of supportive in terms of the journey you've been on to get from where you are.
Extremely, yeah. I mean, I started off with, I I pitched Coalitions, my first game, to Phalanx, who's sort of a much bigger company. And all the people at Phalanx have just been fantastic. I did some development work with Phalanx on other titles. Everyone there really supportive, enabled me to meet other people, other developers. And then you just get introduced and meet people, going to conventions, meeting people.
Yeah.
And everyone, without exception, I've come across has been generous with their time and their advice. Nobody ever wants anything back for it. They just genuinely want to help you.
That's great.
People just want you to succeed. I mean, you reached out to me 6 months or so ago, probably 9 months ago, asking if you could help and help to promote Form Square Games, and you've been brilliant, and it's just a wonderful community to be a part of, because I mean everyone's in this because it's their hobby and it's their interest, and they're just trying to do things that are fun. It's all about enjoying what you're doing and hopefully giving enjoyment to other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to pick up on is the game system. So you mentioned that about when you're thinking about your design process, making the game really around 2-3 key mechanics. So what were those mechanics from your point of view? What were your key start points as far as the Napoleon's game, Bonaparte's Eastern Empire is concerned?
Yeah, so for the Limits of Glory series, Bonaparte in Egypt and Maida, the mechanic I wanted to use is using dice, and you're rolling a set number of dice between 1 and 4 for everything you're doing. And you're needing to get a 5 or a 6 to succeed at whatever it is. So 5 or 6 is a success. 1s to 4s are failures. And so by using that mechanic, I've enabled movement, because you'll be in spaces that have a space value, and that space value is the number of dice you have to roll to move out of that space.
I love that mechanic.
So
it's really clever.
If you're in a 1 space, you only get 1 dice to roll, and you've got to get a 5 or a 6. So it's quite hard to get out of 1 space. If you're in a 4 space, it should be relatively easy. Because again, you've got commanders. There's lots of the games are all about management of your commanders rather than your troops. You've got troops, and your troops are really important, but it's how you use what I call the glory rating of your commanders that will determine how well you do in the game. And this glory rating that they're all given, and all commanders have a different rating, and I'll talk about that in a minute, how they get that, but the rating allows you to re-roll dice effectively. So again, you've got this constant decision. You might, Bonaparte in Egypt, you might want to get from Cairo up the coast to Jaffa or Al Arish or somewhere, and you feel that you need to get there quick. Do you use your glory up, re-rolling to make sure you get there? But by the time you get there, you've exhausted so much glory, you've got nothing left to fight your combats with. Or do you accept going slower, perhaps more methodically, but then when you get there, you're still very strong? There's no right or wrong. You have to plan how you want to use your glory to mitigate the situations. The whole game design, or the whole series, is about mitigating luck. Luck's a really contentious issue in game design. So again, going back to Coalitions, the first game I designed, I wanted to have no luck in it. So there's no dice in Coalitions. There's really no luck. It's all down to your negotiation skills and how you interact with the other players. That determines who wins. So it's very determinative. You're going to win or lose because of the way that you've performed, and that's it. There's no luck involved at all. Whereas this game, this is exploring luck, because I believe events that happen are because that just happens to be the chain of events that happened, and that becomes history because that's what happened. Napoleon could have been killed at Toulon in 1793 or whatever, storming the bastion, and then he was wounded. He was I think he got a pike bayonet thing in the leg when he was that could have killed him, and then that would have been luck.
Didn't he always say he wanted lucky generals?
Give me a lucky general.
There you go.
Exactly. Because things happen, and the way that you cope with what happens is, so luck is what's happened. Your skill is how you adapt to the situation that's happened. So when you're playing any of these games, stuff is going to get thrown at you in a really quite a randomly generated way. So the event table generates all the events that actually happened in the campaign. So everything that happened is all in the game.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily all going to happen, and it's not necessarily all going to happen in the right order. It's going to happen roughly in the right chronological order, but not necessarily exactly. And some things may never happen. And that's luck. The British army that went to Egypt in 1801, if there had been a massive storm, one in the middle of the Mediterranean, they might have all got sunk and never arrived.
Sure.
But it didn't happen, and they did arrive. So that's what was faced by the French. That was a situation that they had to cope with.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to do. I want to generate a situation where luck keeps throwing stuff up, and you have to use your skill as a player to manage it. So even though there is luck in this, hopefully people won't see that as a negative, because the game is about examining how you manage luck, rather than just being a dice throwing festival of luck. Like, here's another bucket of dice. How lucky? How many sixes I've got? It's not that. It's all about, you have to make a decision. Almost, you're constantly making decisions. You've rolled some dice. You've failed to do something. Do you use glory up to try and succeed to push your luck? Do you not? If you're going to leave a general looking after, the garrison of Alexandria, how much glory does that general need? Which general are you going to pick to leave there? Because he might be attacked, and unless he can defend it, if you've got a weak general there, So, but then Alexandria may never be attacked, so you could have left your worst general there, and it doesn't matter because he didn't come into play.
No.
That's what the game's examining.
No, I love that, and I must admit, when we played it, we loved the whole movement mechanic was really good, because it kind of took into effect the terrain effects, what you were doing, where you were moving, had the element of luck in there, whether you were going to be able to do what you wanted to do or not. Bad things happen, messages get lost, etc., etc. And I thought that was great. I really like the glory mechanic. I think that's very unique. I've not seen that in any other kind of style of board game like this. It works really well for Napoleonics, where you've got lots of key characters that we're all familiar with taking part in these campaigns. And how did you kind of decide from your research the glory ratings, or the scope of glory rating that each commander could have?
Yeah. Okay. So originally, when the design process, I wanted to design this game, and I wanted to give every commander a skill rating and a luck rating. So each commander would have 2 ratings.
Right.
And so, let's say Nelson chasing the French fleet across the Mediterranean, you could say he's got a very high skill rating, but at that time his luck was terrible because he missed them, even sort of sailed past them in the night.
Yeah.
So you could give him an extremely low luck rating. And initially I was thinking that the skill would enable you to perhaps re-roll your own dice, and the luck rating would be enabling you to re-roll opponents' dice if something bad had happened against you and so on. But just the whole mechanic was just all too cumbersome. There was too many markers. There's too much going on. So I quite soon realised that I was going to need to combine this. So fortunately, with a lot of especially the well-known commanders, there's a lot of literature out there about their personality types and how they rated as generals. So you can build up a fairly good picture of how skilled certain generals were and how not so skilled other generals were. That's fairly easy. The luck side of it is harder to judge. There are certainly some instances, with Bonaparte and so many of the things that he did in going to Egypt. You could say he was lucky to get there in the first place.
Yep.
He was lucky not to get the plague. He was lucky to be able to get back to France. There was loads of things that especially English historians will say that he was lucky about it. I don't think the French historians say so. Interesting, I was talking to Fred Saval, and he said the exact same thing. He said French historians have a very different point of view from English historians, which I thought is which is great, because French historians would probably put it down to skill. This is skill that this happened. It wasn't luck; it was skill that he managed to get his fleet there. It's skill that he went that way and not that way, and that's what the games are trying to explore.
Sure.
So basically, I read as much as I could about the leaders that I could find. And certainly most of the divisional commanders and a lot of the brigadiers, there's quite a bit of information about.
Yeah.
It can be quite difficult to know. I mean, say in Bonaparte in Eastern Empire, one of the British generals that can come in quite late in the game, was not a general, it was a colonel, a chap called Murray, basically lands in Suez with a mixed Ottoman and British force, and he hangs around for... In history, what he actually did, he landed, hung around for a week or two, and then evacuated again.
Right.
How do you get information on how skillful or how lucky that chap was? It's hard. So some of it is balancing the game to make the game work.
Yeah.
And hopefully the information is based on as much as I could research the skill levels of those commanders. So. But purposely, the glory rating is rolled for as well. So there is a swing. So you roll at the start when a commander is deployed. You'll roll for his rating. So you'll have a fixed amount plus a variable amount with a dice roll.
Yeah.
And so you might have someone, I don't know, like Lan is there, Lan and Marmont. They may both roll, one of them might get 3 1s or something and have a terrible rating. The other one might get 3 6s or something and have a fantastic rating. So there is variability in it, and that's on purpose as well, to explore for the player to be able to explore. Okay, so I've got this general and he's not that good at the moment. How do I manage that? Because you've only got what you've got and you've got to manage it.
I suppose it makes every game uniquely different.
Fantastic replayability.
You can take lots of different approaches. One of the things that I picked up on the game, which again I haven't seen done in many games, is how you combine the land part of the campaign and the naval part of the campaign into one package. And I really liked how you did that in terms of the glory rating was used in both the naval element and the land element. So did you find that difficult to get that balance between the two, or did you find that the system lent itself to being able to do both elements together in one game?
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 aspects to the naval part in the game. So the first phase of the game is effectively the invasion. It's the French fleet leaving France. You've got to try and get across the Mediterranean to Egypt, stop at Malta if you can be beneficial. The French player has to choose whether they want to or not. It's their choice, and there's benefits and drawbacks to doing that.
Yeah.
And they've got to decide. And you're using up the skill and the glory of both Nelson and Bruet. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Nelson is the only character in the whole game that can actually regain some glory. So Nelson starts with quite a low rating because he was very unlucky and he did miss the French fleet. So he has quite a low rating. So the chances of him catching the French is quite difficult. It can happen, and in quite a few games it does happen. If it does happen, it's not the end of the game. Because again, I read quite a lot about this. I mean, the French invasion fleet depends on which sources you read, but it's like 450 to 500 ships. Nelson had 13. So with 13 ships, you're not necessarily going to be able to stop 500 ships going where they want to.
No.
So even if the French were caught by Nelson and there'd been a battle, it could well have been that they might have lost lots of ships, but probably the fleet would have dispersed. By the time they left Malta, all the ships knew where they were going. So there's no reason to presume that even if a few ships were lost, even if ships were captured, the large majority of the army could still not turn up.
Yeah.
And the game allows for that. So if you get intercepted on the way, you just turn up in Egypt with less stuff.
Right.
If you manage to visit Malta and get there without being detected, you turn up with a lot more stuff.
That's great because it keeps the game rolling along as well. You're not playing that naval part and then that's it, game over, and start again. The game's going to get to the land campaign. It's just a case of logistically you've got left to play with.
And again, it comes back into the whole investigating what is the outcome of luck on the events. You know, if you have bad luck and you get caught, you then turn up in Egypt and you've got less stuff to play with. But you've still got lots of stuff to play with, and you've still got something to do, and you've got to make the most of it. And if you just say, "Oh, I'll give up," then you know, generals in history that became world leaders like Napoleon don't just give up. They just make the most of what they've got and keep going, and that's what the game is trying to reflect. So after the initial invasion phase, depending on whether they were caught or not, the initial fleets could potentially change, and you'd get people like Villeneuve, and you get Hood and Trowbridge and other characters will deploy. And then throughout the event table, you'll get some more British. Sidney Smith turns up, and Lord Keith turns up with a British force. And so some of the naval aspects, then the French, potentially can have a naval element on it, but they're always going to be on the back foot. And the British, they can be used to support sieges, which is what Sidney Smith did at Acre, which was probably, you could say, is the turning point in the campaign for Napoleon. And so the naval aspect runs through the whole game. You've got the and the British ships can transport stuff as well. So you could take the British fleet to Acre, pick up an Ottoman army, sail it across the Mediterranean, and drop it off in Alexandria, which is what the British fleet did with the army of Mustafa Pasha. And so that's all in. It's all in the game. And so the French player doesn't know where an army might turn up on the coastline. So if the French player sends everything up into Syria, and then suddenly an Ottoman army forms at Rhodes or Cyprus or something, and then lands on the north coast of Egypt, which can be quite difficult. So
definitely.
But that may not happen as well. It depends if those events occur. And that's why I didn't want to have it as a card game, because if you've got cards, you can be sitting there with your card in your hand and you think, oh, okay, I've got the invasion fleet, I'll wait to turn 3 and that's going to be the best time for me to play it, and when he's there I can now play it and I've got him. With this event clock, neither player knows when anything's going to happen. So whether it's beneficial to you or beneficial to your opponent, stuff just happens and you've got no say in when it happens.
And that's good. It's that fog of war, isn't it? And but it also adds an awful lot of chrome to the game, and I'm sure it'll be replicated in Maida as well. I think the whole event timeline is really cleverly balanced. So like you say, certain things are likely to happen in a certain order, but they might not all happen, or some might not happen at all. And again, that's quite unique to holding the cards or rolling a dice. And that, I suppose, by following that original mechanic, if you'd have gone down that route, the risk could have been then that you could have had a game that wouldn't follow the course of history at all in any shape or form, because everything would be happening completely out of sync. You've got players holding on to cards to turn 5 when that should have really been something that happened much earlier. It would have unbalanced the game. So I can kind of understand your logic around that, but it's useful to kind of, I think, hopefully the listeners as well, to understand how you kind of came to that decision and why. We'll take a short break in a moment. I just wanted to pick up, obviously you've done a lot of research around that particular period for your first game. What about playtesting? Because having played the game ourselves at the club, with your prototype that you sent me, to me it looked like a game that, as well as having an awful lot of research, I'd had an awful lot of playtesting. How much had the game changed from your original kind of design to where we are now?
Okay, so a lot. So I think when you start designing the game, I think one of the most important things to do is to start writing the rules straight away. Sometimes people design games, wait until they've got a fairly good game, and then start thinking, I better write the rules down. Whereas I think it's really important to write the rules and then keep on editing them and keep changing them. And that way you've got a really good framework. So when you're play testing and a situation comes up and say, well, what happens when, this? So then you can go to your rules and go, right, so that should be in the movement section. Right, we've got nothing in here that covers that. Right, we need to think about it. Well, what do you think should happen? And this, well, I think it should this, and what I was thinking, and then you think of it. And as a designer, you must always take the decision, and you shouldn't feel as though you've got to take it there and then. During a playtest game, often it's good just to keep the game moving, make a decision, but you need to reflect on it. And then, so most of the changes I'd make to the game after playtesting would be days afterwards, when I'd had time to sort of let it all sink in. I think the best way of handling that is for that to happen, and then I'd write that into the rules. So by the time we got to the final set of Bonaparte in Egypt, I think I was on version 36 of the rules. Wow. And each version is edited probably about 20 times.
Right.
So you've got sort of 20 times 36 is the amount of rewrites the rules went through.
Right.
So, but not massive rewrites, but just, when so many little bits have changed, I'm starting to think, okay, this has changed significantly now. We'd start on a new version. And that's the only way to do it, really. And the end product is, all playtesting is just about balancing the game. I'd say, version 1 or 2, the game was there. Everything was there. Everything that I wanted in the game was all there. And then all those versions were all about just making it work.
Sure.
So you didn't get to a situation where someone said, well, if I do this and do that, then you can't do that anymore. You think, that doesn't work. And so that's what the playtesting is about.
Okay.
Taking out all of those edge cases that you don't really think about when you're designing. You think, I'll do that and that'll work. And then somebody will always point out to you that there's a different way around it, and you've got to then legislate for it in the rules.
To some degree, you need third parties to break it for you, don't you, every time, and you rebuild it each time, adding on new pieces. Or streamlining existing ones from that point of view.
Streamlining it. So talking about all these different versions, that's not kind of constantly adding in more and more rules. Don't do this, I add a rule. So what you're really trying to do is think, okay, well, there's all these situations. How can I make it that one rule will cover that? And how can you write the rule so it's watertight? So nobody can say, well, does he mean this or does he mean that? So you're really trying to, because I wanted one mechanic to do everything, and I wanted that mechanic to be simple. So when you're playing it, even without looking at the rules, you think, well, I'm in this situation, I'm in a 2-space, or I'm doing that. I know that what I've got to do is roll that many dice, and I'm looking for 5s or 6s. That's that is what I'm after doing. The decision process about what you're actually doing, whether it's some sort of revolt or uprising, or whether you're trying to fight or do a siege or whether try and move ships, you're still doing it using the same thing. So intuitively, you don't have to keep going back into the rules. But if you do need to go in the rules, then it's really clearly put in there. That's what what you're after. That's what I was trying to achieve.
Yeah, sure.
And it is unfortunately just playtesting. I'm doing a lot of playtesting at the moment on the third game, Santa Mora and Capri, and they're 2 kind of mini games. And as games, they're really good. I really love them. They're really interesting. The topics are interesting, and they're designed to be quite short, but they're just not balanced yet. And so I know the game's going to work. Everything about it works, and it's really nice. But it's got to, every time people play it, it's got to give them a good game. The good thing about design, or the thing you aim for design, is to give the player meaningful decisions. So they've got decision points almost in every turn that actually means something. And at the end of it, for them not to feel kind of flat, like, well, I took all these decisions, but it didn't help me. I lost anyway.
Sure.
And that's the balancing. And you only get that through playtesting. You only get that by test and test and test.
And how long's the process, that playtest process? How long would you say, time-wise, that's taken from when you started out to where you are now?
Well, interesting, with Maida, because the series effectively is using I want the series all to use the same rules. So almost from the get-go with Maida, I had the framework of the rules from Bonaparte in Egypt.
Which is
so
tried and tested.
All the rules work. I know they work. So almost from the start, all I'm trying to do is balance it. I've got the events I want to put in. I've got the size of forces. Historically, these are the size of forces. I can't change that because that's what's there. Historically, these are the commanders that are there. I can't change that. Historically, these are the events that occurred. I can't change that. So what can I change? Well, I can change the likelihood of what event's going to turn up on what dice roll. I can make a commander slightly more represented as slightly more skillful or slightly more lucky and so on. So I can change that. I can change the sizes of the spaces or the number values of the spaces. So certain things are easier and harder to move out of or to move into. None of those things when you start. You've got all the facts, but all that is the balance.
Sure.
And so you put down what you think they should all be, and then you play it and you realise, oh, that's wrong. If that's a 1 space, you're never going to get out there. So let's make that a 2, or that needs to be a 4.
It's that tweaking again.
It's the tweaking. And what you're trying to do with the terrain is you're trying to think about, well, in this game, in Italy. So the central ridge of Italy is kind of quite mountainous. And so you want the spaces that are in that area to be harder to move in. The coastal plain spaces, you want them to be easier to move in.
Sure.
And so you've got to reflect that in the game as well.
Okay, good. Okay, well, look, we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll have a chat about Maida in a bit more detail. We've talked quite a bit about the Eastern Empire game, which obviously is about to launch. So I'd like to talk in the next bit about Maida, your upcoming games and other plans you got maybe for the future. And also talk a little bit about the components, your UK publisher, who you're using and why, the wonderful artwork and where your inspiration for that came from as well. But yeah, we'll get back and chat about those things in a moment.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.